5 a.m. wake-ups, sleepless nights, the never-ending need for a snack to know why, or for just one more story at bedtime. While domestic bliss is billed as the one foolproof path to happiness, some are calling bullshit. We're seeing a growing movement of people rebelling against the procreation expectation. The child-free lifestyle can inspire a range of reactions, from tactless questions to even outright anger. In this episode, we seek to understand who the child-free are, the challenges they face, and how they navigate going against such a strong societal norm. We'll explore the demographic data, studies on happiness, and even dig through the pages of child-free forums to find these answers. That's what you're in for today on Impolite Society.
Oh, I just detest rude, unladylike young ladies.
I hope you don't mind me being a tad rude.
I myself am strange and unusual.
Don't be rude.
That is some weird, wild stuff.
Shocking, isn't it?
It's a scandal!
But it's provocative.
Please stop making me blush.
Welcome to Impolite Society, the podcast that looks into the taboos that you can't discuss when you're at a work conference. I'm Rachel.
I'm Laura.
And I recently watched a movie, and that movie is having a moment right now. I think it's like potentially Oscar bait or Oscar
totally
content.
Oscar bait, yeah.
And it's having its little moment on social media, and it is called Night Bitch. And it chronicles a stay-at-home mom's torment caring for her child. And it's so awful that it awakens some ancient spirit within her that turns her into a dog at night.
So I have not seen the movie yet, but I did finish the book less than a week ago. So
oh, wow.
I'm very familiar with it. It hasn't even made its way back to the library yet, but somebody is on the hold list for it, and I'm very sorry.
I'll have to pick your brain about the book because I have thoughts on the movie, and those thoughts are not necessarily positive. Maybe I got very caught up on the fact that it just portrayed being a stay-at-home mom as this hellscape. And fun fact about me, I'm a stay-at-home podcaster, right? And who happens to take care of two small children during the day.
Yeah, that's all you do is you just podcast all day. And then
at nap time, I'm out there. Yeah. I pull up my editing tool. I'm like, beep, bop, boop, boop, boop. I'm like, kids, calm down. Mama's got to research choking. No, but I mean, it had an effect on me because I literally spent the rest of the night reading Reddit and what people were saying about it and like watching reaction videos. Yeah. I kept seeing a lot of content that was just like reinforcing that moms are miserable, specifically stay-at-home moms, and we're just like these unhappy, miserable people.
It definitely painted motherhood as pretty bleak, and I am all about putting the real out into the world, but that main character, she doesn't even have a name in the book. She needs a therapist and stat.
A common trend that I saw in this story of motherhood being so bleak, as you put it, it was coming from child-free creators and Redditors out there who were taking this movie, this creative fictional work, as a documentary on what life is like for people with kids. And since we had this nice little child-free topic steaming on the back burner, it was submitted by listener Randy. Thank you for sending an idea, and we do cover them. So if you have one, send us one.
This is proof, living proof.
Yes, but hopefully you still want to after this episode.
Sorry, Randy. We'll see how it shakes out. You let us know what you think.
Okay, so I thought, this is a great time. We had the topic, this night bitch conversation inspired me. I felt the burn, the urge, the itch to talk about this bitch tonight. This two-night bitch. Night bitch.
I get it. Night bitch. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Since we're constantly sold the story of parents being these miserable sad sacks, I thought it would be interesting to see how the other half stacks up. So we are getting into the hot debate around being child-free and if that really does improve your life. But before we begin, let me just say, if y'all want to be like little A+, I'm going to say Laura and Rachel's from school who wanted extra credit and were like, actually, teacher, like, how can I get my 98 up to 100? If you want that extra credit, you can listen to Is It Normal to Hate My Kids, which is an episode we did like 2021, 2022.
Yeah, early, I feel like.
I remember recording it in what is now our nursery. Before it was a nursery. And I think we had just gorged on sushi.
That sounds about right.
Yep.
Sounds delightful.
And that's kind of deals with the inverse of the same question. And I'd like to think it's an objective look, if not like a little bit critical, at how children affect our happiness. And I think it was that more cynical look at the time because I was #childfree when I did the research for that episode. Now we're doing a little bit of an about face because I'm writing this today as a parent of 2. And Laura, you are likewise.
I know that I had Charlotte at that time.
Yeah, you did. That was You were the parent and I was the not parent.
Okay.
Was the perspective.
I'm interested to see that episode. I have not listened to it in a very long time. So I'm going to listen to it tomorrow after we do this recording and see how I flip-flop, right? And how I say what I say today is going to contradict what I said then.
I bet yours is pretty similar, but don't fear. I'm guessing if you're new here, right? If you're not just like somebody who listens to every episode, you've probably found this podcast because you have strong feelings about this topic, one way or the other. And I want you to know that we're going to be objective, right? You might have heard, oh God, 2 parents talking about child-free. We're not just going to be here shitting on this movement as quote unquote breeders ourselves.
I'll try not to, but we'll see. We'll see how it shakes out. That's my disclaimer.
Okay, so let's get into it. Child-free by choice is pretty simple to understand, right? It's right there in the name. It's people who have made the choice to live without a child or children. And I'm going to do my little word nerdery here because semantics are really important. And I think that the term itself shows a cultural shift because while it did exist since the early 1900s, the most common term for folks living without children was childless. So child-free, in contrast, has a positive connotation, right? They're not missing something in their lives, but they're actually free of the obligations that come with parenting. See, debt-free, right?
Yeah.
Responsibility-free, smoke-free. I don't know. I'm listing things off the top of my head.
No, you're totally right. It's not smokeless. I'm smoke-free.
Child-free in certain contexts can mean without children at this moment or free of them right now. The real people in the child-free movement, they don't like that. They think it means I've committed to living without children for my whole life. But theoretically, the term child-free is not static, but an identity that is continually chosen and negotiated within social settings. And that's what makes it so interesting.
Yeah, I think at first the 70s seemed early to have made that rebrand. But then I think about it, and it does make sense because that's around the time women are starting to enter the workforce en masse. We're getting close to the 80s, which I think is like, that's when
Working girl,
exactly. So we're right up against that tracks and the time frame of reframing that issue. And don't undercut your semantics being interesting because it is super interesting, and don't let anybody tell you different because I think whenever the zeitgeist changes their verbiage, changes what they decide they're going to call something, it's usually for a pretty interesting reason. And I think that this falls in line with that.
And history will support that because how we view having children in a family has shifted so much in the last 150 years explicitly. The social norm, I mean, up until even the 70s and 80s, was that you had kids. If you could, you had kids. It's a natural progression of life, as much as learning to walk, going through puberty, and procuring a mate. It was a huge part of religion as well, still is apparently.
Yeah.
And to quote the famous Psalms 127.3, I don't know how to cite. Why is it always my episodes that are citing
Is it
Fucking
chapter and verse? That's what it is. Chapter 127, verse 3.
127. Ooh, they need an editor. Line 3, stanza 3. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb a reward. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them.
That's a whole episode there about the quiver full movement, but we'll leave that for the moment.
You mean the breeder kink?
we'll just set that one aside.
So not only was there a heavy expectation around having a family, but there really wasn't a lot of choice either. Contraceptive was sketchy at best. And I know you talked about it a little bit in the condom episode, I believe, but we need to do another whole one just about weird ways people used to try to prevent pregnancy.
Yeah.
Because if you listen to Society Chats, you know I'm on a Donner Party kick right now. And so I've read some nonfiction books about like that time period, and it talked about contraceptive on the Oregon Trail. And I'm like, oh, these poor women never stood a chance.
Ah, that is a good episode topic. Marking it, earmarked.
But the moral of the story here is that for most of humanity's history, if you fucked, you were probably going to end up a parent one day or another, right? It was a natural consequence of what you were doing. But luckily, modern science has removed some of that fear, and it has enabled us to prevent pregnancy. And as a result, people realized they could get by with a few less arrows in that quiver. And suddenly, go forth and multiply became a little lower on the average person's to-do list. And this is really recently. This was in like the last 100 to 150 years max. For the first time in human history, parenthood became a choice. And it turns out when having kids becomes a choice, people choose to have a lot less of them.
Shocker. It's kind of like there are a lot of work and a lot of money and a lot of stress.
And in the early days of humanity, a lot of potential death, risk of loss of life, your life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember having a conversation with my grandma when I was childless, child-free, I don't know.
You were child-free.
Child-free, and we were having an honest discussion about it, and I said, I don't know, it just always seemed like a choice that one would make, and I never felt compelled to make the choice. And my grandma was like, is it? You
like,
know what I mean? It was just something that happened.
She's like, I needed a man to support me. The man who was supporting me wanted to fuck. And we had sex and we tried to use the Catholic whatever rhythm method. And now I have 4 kids in 5 years.
Precisely.
And having that choice meant that fertility rates have gone way down. Because back in the pioneer days, in the 1840s, the average rate of fertility was about 7 children per woman.
Jesus fucking Christ.
That's a lot of babies. And since the introduction of a common contraception and of also education and choices for women, the fertility rate significantly declined after that. By the mid-1900s, the number was down to 3 children per woman.
Wow.
And then today in the U.S., it sits at a crisp 1.78 children per woman. I don't know how you get that 7/8 of a child, but we're doing it.
It's an average, but we're above average. Rachel, you and I. It's the only thing about me that's above average. I have a round 2.
Hey, you've made more podcast episodes than the average person.
That's fair. That's fair.
I got more dog hair in my house than the average person.
True.
So there you go. We're above average in many ways.
Reaching for the stars.
Mm-hmm. So people are having less kids, and less people are opting to have kids. Yet somehow, deciding not to have children remains a strong societal taboo. So who are those who are deciding not to procreate? Who are the ones who are bucking the system, forging their own path, and deciding, that's not for me? Do you know what raises a lot of questions? A married couple who don't have kids.
Oh, it's true.
Because when they walk into the room, everybody's wondering what the heck is going on there, right?
Especially if they've been married for a couple of years.
While some people do let biology make the choice for them, many more are making the choice for themselves. The distinction is major because for many in the community, they don't want kids or they don't have the kids despite the fact that they can, right? Or at least they assume that there's no issues because they've never even tried.
Yeah.
Who are the people who are not trying to have kids? Well, according to the Pew Research Center, they paint a very stereotypical picture of who the child-free people are. According to them, they tend to have higher levels of education, be more career-focused, and reside in urban areas. But this is really just painting in broad strokes here, folks, because with recent research, the lines are a lot more blurred. I found a really interesting study that looked at people without children, specifically those over 50 who never had kids, and those under 50 who decided that they didn't plan on it, right? Because you can't rule out that they might not have it in the future, And I feel like there's actually a very distinct difference in those two communities. Of those who were 50 plus and didn't have kids, almost 3/4 said that they had planned on it at one point, or they just, weren't really decided. And 40% of these people cited the reason they didn't have kids. So almost half said they didn't have kids because it just never happened, right? It was just never the right moment. They didn't have the right partner. Or maybe they tried and nothing happened. And they're just like, c'est la vie, mon ami.
Yeah.
And in this, I see the career gal of the 70s and 80s who got the education, got the career, and never quite had the itch to settle down, right? She just never prioritized it. It was she always had other things to do.
Yeah.
And now she's 50 and she's just like, oh well, guess that wasn't for me.
Yeah, totally. And, that kind of person removed the contraceptives and then no baby happened. And it's just like, oh, well, and you move on with your life.
And to me, that stands in stark comparison to the child-free people of today.
Indeed.
Who are deciding in their 20s or as early as their teens that children are not in their life plan. And they are purposefully putting aside that aspect of life in order to maintain the degrees in the corner office and the ideal lifestyle. And of course, happiness that they are associating with not having kids. So before, it felt like it was a consequence almost of what happened, and it just wasn't prioritized and it never happened. And this, it's like a purposeful, I'm not even going to entertain this notion because I want to do all these things that I've seen previous generations do. And so to me, it's almost like an inverse.
Yeah. I totally see that. And they're crafting an identity around it, which I think is even more interesting and possibly foolish. But that's just me.
Right. Because who wants to build an identity over how they feel in their 20s? I don't even.
Or in their teens.
Right. I don't even like the same things I liked 2 years ago as a 30-something. It's just things progress and change. Which don't tell them that because that will really piss them off. So overall, the gist of this is that there's nothing physically preventing folks who decide to be child-free from having children. Although some do make the decision for medical reasons, which we'll get a little more into that in a second. They simply have different priorities and don't feel that the path of parenthood is for them. And now I already feel the next question coming from everybody's aunt at Christmas or Thanksgiving dinner. The big why. Why don't you want kids? My kids are my life. My kids are the best thing I've ever done. Why don't you want kids?
Why really is the best question and the question we seek to answer on this podcast. But let me tell you, whys can get pretty annoying when your 4-year-old asks it about 100 times a day. I'm just going to set that as a precedent.
Add that to the list. The girl with the list, you know what I'm talking about? The reference?
No.
There's a lady on TikTok who every time she sees a video, she'll take a video of something bad about parenting and then she stitches it and she adds it to a notes document in her phone of all the reasons why she won't have kids.
Yeah,
and
but she doesn't have the alternative of all the reasons to have kids. She doesn't see all the
Well, I know, but
videos.
it's just funny because every time you see a video of a kid misbehaving, everybody's like, get the girl with the list, get the lady with the list. So that you just added a bullet point. Ask 100 questions a day. Ask why 100 times a day.
Why?
Well, let me tell you, Laura, because to get to the heart of why people are choosing to be child-free, let's go straight to the horse's mouth. I found a couple really interesting papers online that examine the endless stream of honest, anonymous thoughts of the child-free. This study analyzed the posts that folks make to forums and communities online about being child-free to understand the stories that child-free people tell the world and themselves to navigate the stigma they receive for their choices. And choices is a key word here because it plays a central role in these stories, but in vastly different ways. And in one of the literary reviews, they found that it appears in contrasting forms consistently in two narratives. The first says that remaining child-free is a choice that they consciously made. This enables those telling the story to put having children and not having children as equally viable alternatives. So those who use this will talk about how they've talked with partners, counselors, have done all this deep soul searching to come to a decision that's right for them.
Okay, they took a look at A and B and closely and then made a determination.
Right. This strategy aims to put both paths on an equal playing field and invokes our notions of individual rights and individual freedom, saying like, I considered it and I made the best choice for me.
Fair.
So not only do they do this to establish equal footing, saying it's an equally viable option, they often do this to have to counteract stigma as well, and they will use that in supporting their reasoning. The paper found that child-free individuals will have to put kind of this like positive spin behind why they don't want to have kids. This will often cause the speaker to establish a superior moral identity, citing that the work and the self-reflection they did is a sign of being enlightened, open-minded, and even selfless, since they've looked inward and don't see themselves being suited to being a parent and don't want to cause suffering to a hypothetical child. Laura, I know how you feel about your family. Does having a strained relationship with your parents make your life not worth living?
No. No.
This is also where you get a lot of the antinatalism about life being suffering and the environment, specifically climate change, and how people don't want to bring humans into the world to suffer.
And this concept, this justification is my top complaint about this movement. I don't give a fuck. Have kids, don't have kids. I do not care. I do not judge people on just the fact of having kids or not having kids. It's the reasons that more will dig into that makes me raise my hackles a little bit. And I mean, a lot of my closest friends, they are child-free by choice, but they don't feel the need to justify their decisions with a bunch of bullshit moral philosophy like antinatalism. I fucking hate antinatalism. And it's not even about kids. It's just the whole concept of it. I was not introduced to it until after I had kids, but I guarantee that 10 years ago, Laura would feel the same way about this. Come at me, bro. I will throw the gauntlet down on antinatalism because it is fucking nonsense.
Some people feel that the world is going to be burning down. Even though the bubonic plague was a thing that happened, they think it's going to get worse than that in the next decade. And
worse than going across the Oregon Trail and being your entire family being slaughtered in front of you.
That was just bad decision making.
I mean, the real Oregon Trail and the thing of like, oh, you're talking about the Donner Party. Yeah, I mean, but that's
no, I'm talking about some man decided he wanted to get rich in California, and then he dragged his poor wife and children across the fucking continent. And
you freeze to death, or you're slaughtered by Indians in front of your entire family. Like,
most of them made it. Most of the immigrants made it. Most of the pioneers made it, right? Like, I want to say, it's been a minute, 80 to 90% survived.
Oh, wow. That actually does surprise me.
60% of the Donner Party survived.
I did know that. I listened to some stuff.
And
on the
mostly
Donner
women.
Party
So
before.
women and children were the
Yeah.
survivors, which we can get into that. I'm going to do an episode on survival psychology because I'm like,
I can't wait.
and again, it's partly because women are biologically able to survive and partly because of social norms. So let's dig into it in a couple, probably like a month for you, listener. I'm sorry, month and a half. It'll come up eventually. Anyways, but that's the story all about choice. Now, the other script that you hear around not having children throws choice out the window. And it's all about focusing on the lack of choice. Because as Lady Gaga says, baby, I'm born this way. This co-opts the argument saying that we all have the natural urge to reproduce. We have that biological clock, that biological imperative, and it flips the script. They fight that norm by saying they've never felt the maternal or paternal instinct. They don't have that call to procreate. Or some people will say they don't feel like their brain has the right hormones, like they don't feel like they have that nurturing side to them, or that predisposition to being a parent. A lot of people in this camp will say that they've identified this from an early age and they don't see it changing, and that's why they're committing to it. Others will cite parts of them that are really hard to change, like personality, temperament, or disposition, as saying like, I know me is not going to be a good parent, so I don't have a choice. Like, I'm not cut out for being a parent.
It's not that they don't have a choice, but they feel that they shouldn't be. Like, it wouldn't be a responsible choice to go the other way.
Right.
And this one, I totally get. I mean, not only because it was part of the reason that I used to say before I decided to have kids. This was definitely kind of part of my camp. And having children definitely is a choice these days. And if you've never felt compelled to choose it, why on earth would you choose it? I mean, I don't feel naturally compelled to run marathons. And guess what? I've never run a fucking marathon. And I don't feel like I'm missing out on shit. Even though there are a lot of people who make social media posts about how great it is to run a marathon. And I'm like, great for you. It just doesn't occupy that brain space, and I've never felt compelled to do it.
That's so interesting that you bring up marathons, because I think that came up a lot in our previous episode because I had just run my marathon or I was like in training for it.
Oh, I do remember that. There was a lot of marathon talk in the Childfree or
In the Do Children Make You Happy?
Yeah.
And that's funny because this might just say more about me, because I ran a marathon because somebody else told me, like, hey, do you want to do this? And I was like, sure. And that's like,
and I'd be like, nope.
Maybe that's why I had kids. I was like, this might be a fun challenge. And so I winged it, you know?
Yeah.
I don't regret running a marathon. Would I want to do it again? I haven't. Does that tell you anything?
Yeah.
Another script that falls into this is something I see all the time, where the individual claims that they don't have a choice to be a parent. This is the night bitch argument, is that they can't be a parent because of the untenable cost of parenthood.
I'm sorry, but this is fucking ridiculous. I mean, kids are expensive and parents do not have enough social support, but shut the fuck up. If you're college educated, you can afford a kid if you wanted one. If you wanted one. And that's fine, right? I don't know.
Well, okay, this isn't just about the monetary cost, right? This isn't just talking about college or the fact that you have to buy your weight in fucking cow's milk every week.
True.
This is talking about the thing that we hear constantly from child-free people, is that parents are miserable, or at least I know I would be miserable. They claim that the horrors and discomfort of being a parent means the individual has no choice but to rule it out for themselves. And I have even seen people go as far as to say that they'd rather die than become a parent because it would be an actual death sentence for them.
Fuck off. Like, you are so special and you're so unique that this thing that almost every human being since the dawn of time has done, having offspring, just makes you want to die. This is a totally modern era statement to me.
Oh, for sure.
There is no way that these child-free people in their 50s are saying this. Get your head out of your ass. If you don't think you'll be happy, that's fine. That's a valid life choice. Don't do it. But get some fucking perspective. It
makes me wonder about, like, in the future, in 200 years, where people can be like, I don't want to walk. Like walking is a
I would
choice.
rather die than walk.
Because that hurts my feet. It's not comfortable. Sometimes my legs get tired.
Yeah.
Or like romantic relationships, which I feel like that's next, baby.
Oh,
People
yeah,
aren't
yeah,
going to
yeah.
have partners. They're going to have robots that they fuck. Thank you, Elon Musk. So while you can list out all the reasons that you might not choose to have kids, they will most likely roll up into one of these two categories, right? So what are the reasons? I have bad genes. Oh, that's inverting the stigma around it through choice, saying like, I'm choosing not to bring somebody into the world to suffer with these horrible genes that I have of ADHD.
I used this one for a while. Personally, I think it comes from some sort of family trauma. Kind of you worry about carrying it to the next generation. So, I mean, I feel this one.
Or like another, I've never felt the need. That's child-free, not by choice, right? Saying like, I didn't have a choice. This is just who I am. I've never felt the call. Saying things like the planet is dying. Again, that's inverting that social stigma, saying I'm choosing to do this because it's better for everybody, better for the planet, better for the humans who are already in it.
I'm so moral superior.
Yeah, they are, right? They're better than us. It's fact on paper. I'd literally rather die than have kids. People will say that. Again, that's the not by choice because honestly, who would choose to die, right? You know, that's like not a rational choice.
No.
So that's just saying like they feel so strongly about it, they don't have a choice but not to procreate, right? So like throw us any reasoning, it's going to fold into those two categories.
Got it.
So what do child-free people do with all their time, money, and energy they're saving by not procreating? I mean, whatever the hell they want. It's the fucking dream.
They're navel gazing. That's what they're doing. Because I mean, that's what I did. And it wasn't helpful to me, but
What's
seriously,
navel gazing? They're looking at their belly buttons?
yeah, as in like too much self-introspection.
Oh, yeah. I guess I used to do that too.
Oh, 100%. That was hardcore and probably part of the reason why I did not want kids. Like, when you spend too much time looking inward, it's not a great thing. Seriously, though, the people, whatever they are saving, time, money, energy, good for you. Make it count, right?
Yeah.
Do something good with it. Because if you've got a lot more time and energy and money and mental energy than the rest of it, good. Do something great with it.
See, I'm a little bit in the opposite camp, but I'll get to that in a second because people are, in theory, doing a lot of good with it, right? So outside of the opportunity to explore their interest and seek experiences, we as a whole benefit more from their surplus time and resources through volunteerism and philanthropy. Like, I didn't see a ton of legitimate research, but it seems to be a consensus that people without kids volunteer more.
Mm-hmm.
At least anecdotally. Child-free people will say that they only meet other child-free people while they're out volunteering. And I did also notice this when I was on Young Friends boards, is that as soon as somebody had a kid, they're off the board, right? They're quitting.
Fair.
I did.
Yeah.
And also that people without kids are more likely to make major donations at the end of their life. Like they're
Sure.
going to leave their money to a philanthropy and not to some greedy little offspring.
That's fair. And I like this. The child-free people who seem to have a mission or a purpose to their lives. These are the people that I tend to, I hate to say this, but I do. I respect them more. I just met a woman this past week who had dogs and no kids. And she talked about the volunteer work that they do together. The
dogs go out and like PC people in the hospital or something like that.
Yeah, it was therapy dog work. But there was something else. I don't remember what it was. I was trying to think of it. It's like a fire sniffing dog or something. It was something like the dog had a job, more than one job. And I gave that a solid nod of approval because if you really do have fur babies, give them a fucking job, right? Put some good into the world instead of just having your dog lay around the house with you all day. Like if you had a kid and you never sent them to school and the kid never launched and never had like a job and just existed for you to cuddle them all day, you'd be like, oh, you fucking fucked up as a parent. I don't know.
I honestly think that's how people are parenting right now, though.
Yeah,
to be
and
fair.
they shouldn't be. And I judge that too.
And I kind of lean in the opposite camp because I feel like all of this is still folks who are like combating the stigma around being child free or trying to prove that they aren't the stereotypes. They aren't selfish, self-centered folks. They're contributing members to society. And I just don't think you have to become Mother Teresa just because you don't want to be a parent. Like I don't even think you have to have a special skill or hobby, right? You can literally just exist, live, damn it, and enjoy it. That's what I'm doing. I had these kids because I thought I might enjoy having kids. I don't know how to do anything. I'm not serving the world by raising these kids up. I'm just doing it because I thought it would be fun to dance to the Wiggles during the day. And guess what? It is. So y'all don't have to justify yourselves to anyone. That's how I feel. Just do what you want to do.
I agree. I don't think you have to justify or prove yourself to people. It's not about that. But I do respect it because people are doing something. I think humans are not meant to just live and loaf. We need to give back. And apparently this podcast has turned me into some kind of collectivist because the more we do this, the more I see humans as animals in this collective species. And it's what makes us tick. So just do something, give back. It's going to make you happier and it's going to contribute better to the whole society that we have here. But also, I don't think you're a bad person if you don't, but I do judge you a little. I'm just saying.
I mean, it would be nice, but at the same time, people who do give back in that sense, like the person you met with the therapy dogs, like she's better than I am. Like, I don't think that being a parent is inherently giving back, you know? It's just a lot more time consuming.
But I mean, I don't think she's any better than you, nor do I think she's any worse than you. Like, it's pretty even in the sense you are spending your time and energy doing something instead of just scrolling around on Instagram and like,
well, you're making a lot of assumptions
money
about how great of a parent I am.
I'm just saying you're doing something, you're making an effort, you have a project, you're not just aimless. And
yeah, I think humans need to be doing something.
Yes.
Like, does it have to be to that extent? I think somebody who spends their time giving back, or therapy dog doing that kind of stuff, like, that's awesome. Like, I have more respect for them than I have for myself because at the end of the day, I'm doing something that I want to be doing and it's for me.
Well, I'm sure that it is for her too, right? She gets something back from that. She doesn't do it because she hates it.
Benefiting from it.
Well, society will benefit from your children in the long run. We'll get to that.
That depends on how much of a shit they turn out to be. Which the forecasts are highly likely. But that's just all the good stuff of being child-free. Because I think anybody who's encountered child-free content online might have been surprised to find out that it's a little bit darker than you might expect. The literary reviews that I mentioned earlier echoes that same trend across the platforms, but specifically on the subreddit Are Child Free. The study found that the most common post type by user assigned flair, this is what the person posting it marked it as. So by far the most common type out of like 30 types was rant. And when coding the variables of each post, the researchers found that 60% of posts were coded as hateful. So over half of them fell into that category for derogatory language and or curse words. So what is the derogatory language that is being used in these groups? Well, that, of course, includes the term breeders for all of us who have decided to raise children. Kids can also be described as brats or goblins, aka crotch goblins, or denied all personhood at all by being described as it or that thing.
I mean, I have called my own kids goblins and brats, so I'm not super offended by that one. But thing, that's dark.
When people refer to a baby as it, that pisses me off like no other.
Yeah.
It's a person.
Yeah. And in my opinion, that anger comes just from being unhappy and kind of a miserable person. I don't think that children are the only group that they depersonify in this way. I think probably anyone that they don't like also gets their humanity revoked in their eyes. And you have to think about the sample, right? So who are these people who are hanging out on Child Free? subreddits. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
these are the people who are pretty extreme to one side. So I don't think it's representative of the whole. But I don't think it's just about children. I think it's just about who they are as people.
And it's funny that you talk about who else has been revoked of their humanity online. Anybody who isn't you, right? Like people will say the people that they pass in the street are NPCs, right?
Yep.
Are just literally not human, just shells.
We're breeding a bunch of sociopaths, apparently.
Yeah, welcome to the new world. We shouldn't have brought children into it.
We can make them different.
We can try.
We can try. That's fair. We can try.
And as you can probably guess from how one might think when they're subverting stigma, right, around moral superiority, that leads to a darker side. So to build themselves up, that must be in contrast to others. It is common to see child-free people describe themselves as choosers, people who are awake, the ones who are smart enough to call bullshit on the dreams of domestic bliss, which, fair, good enough for you, but they tend to see people who went the opposite way as not informed, poor decision makers, or people who didn't even make a decision at all, that are chattel, who decided to follow the scripts that society gave us, who are not deep thinkers, people who are just living on autopilot and doing whatever step they believe should come next. And they're insisting that we're all just wallowing in self-inflicted misery.
I mean, I'm sure there's some people that fall into that category, but I expect this narrow-mindedness from youth, right? I
do think
see
anybody who's older than them is sad.
Yeah, exactly. But when I see older people, 25, 30, that age range do it, just grow the fuck up, man. Take the blinders off. Look around you. Every single person around you has a rich inner life that's just as complex as your own.
And it doesn't even take the literary review to see this. Like, just go to the Childfree subreddit, like right now, like go on your phone or whatever you're listening to this to. It's like a weirdly hostile in there. Mm-hmm. I saw a post literally saying, why can't we sterilize people like kittens at birth?
Yeah, that's this antinatalist bullshit. Like, I just want to kick it in the crotch.
And also people are like mad at children just for existing in public spaces. That comes up a lot. Or the fact that a family member might be excited about being a grandfather bothered them. I personally find the vibe off, especially for a group of people who seem to be so adamant that they're making this big decision centered around their own happiness. They just don't seem to be that happy.
That's because that's who they are. I'm telling you. It's just because they're miserable people, whether they had kids or not. And it's probably a good thing they don't have kids, truly.
Truly. And they'll agree with you on that. So that's their common ground.
Okay, well, fair.
But what are child-free people so mad about? Well, it turns out some pretty valid things, right? I promise to be middle ground here, and I'm trying to deliver that because this is where the taboo comes into effect. Because one of the major ways that people without kids experience the stigma is around differences in expectations in the workplace. The unequal distribution of work and expectations is a common experience for the child-free. Those who don't have kids are often asked to work more hours, take worse shifts, like working Christmas and that kind of stuff, and take on more to allow their coworkers who are parents the flexibility required to take care of children. This is backed up by a 2021 Pew study of workers, which included parents and child-free. And that reported that 2/3 of workers say they've seen child-free coworkers be denied time off, have to work overtime, and given a greater workload. 3/4 believe that parents are treated better in the workplace and have seen child-free workers be treated unfairly because they don't have kids. To be fair, while that was like 3 out of 4, 2 out of 3 reported that they've seen workers being treated unfairly for having kids as well. So this might just be a little glimpse into what it's like to be a worker in America.
Yeah.
Everybody's being treated unfairly.
I do. I see this one, and it sucks. But also, maybe this is a little bit the price that you have to pay because as you get older, someone in your generation has to have kids and raise them because who else is going to wipe your old ass when you don't have, I mean, not necessarily like your own kids are going to do it, but you need someone
who's going to bring you your Amazon packages when you're 75.
Precisely.
Not another 75-year-old.
Yeah. who is going to wipe your ass when you're old and insane and physically handicapped? You need some young home health aide to take care of you. And also, they need to pay into Social Security for you to get paid. So it's kind of part of the package deal.
See, to me, this felt like a quid pro quo situation until you decide not to have kids, right? So when you're the young person in the office and you haven't had kids yet, like you take on more of the work, but then you know that somebody's going to do that for you in the future. When you get older, but when you don't, you never actually get the payout of it. And it's
but you will, but you do, but somebody in the society does have to have kids. It's just the facts.
And who's going to take care of the kids? When the school closes down,
yeah,
like
it's not
somebody
you.
has to do it.
Yeah, you're the child-free worker isn't going to volunteer to go watch the other kids. No, the parents are going to do it.
Just don't work as hard.
True.
Just try less and then slack off when everybody's gone because it's a snow day. Just don't do anything.
Yep,
that's what I say. But another area is difficulty accessing healthcare. So a lot of folks who have made the decision to be child-free, especially women, they then decide to undergo healthcare to prevent it from happening. So we see this a lot, again, specifically with women in hysterectomies. But they
really get hysterectomies. I would. Well, I guess you don't want to remove your ovaries because then you need the hormones.
Yeah, that's a bitch,
okay.
And it's
all right,
expensive.
got it.
So these women specifically are having trouble finding a doctor to complete the selective irreversible surgery. Which, listen, I know that doctors shouldn't get to decide what's best for a patient. It's their body. It's their choice. But this group is so big on choice. So I get the desire to not have kids. I get that you're committing to it because you don't want it to happen accidentally. But by doing this huge procedure, you're literally removing choice from yourself in the future.
I see what you're saying. I think that this is bullshit. I am also big on choice. And if you want to remove a portion of your body and you come to regret it, oh, well, that's on you. That's not your doctor. I don't know why doctors do have a problem with this. I've heard it many times. I would be interested to hear the doctor perspective on this issue because it is a big what the fuck to me.
Yeah, they just want to control women's bodies, I guess.
I mean, I would like to hear a doctor's perspective, not necessarily what we've all decided it is, but this one's fair. Fair.
Yeah,
I marked this one check. Legitimate, yeah.
Complaint, yeah. I personally wouldn't do it, but that doesn't mean other people shouldn't.
Exactly.
Another hard part about being child-free is isolation and shrinking social circles. So much of this research is based on individual stories and accounts. Like, there's no academic articles about this, but you will find a lot of think pieces about how someone has child-free and never felt lonely a day in their life, and nobody else who's child-free has ever been lonely. But there's more to the story for sure. Just searching through the child-free subreddit, you can find many posts about growing isolation, and you see it in the comments too, as many friends and loved ones' time and conversation gets consumed with raising families. And I can admit, I felt this before I had kids. When your friend says she's pregnant, there's grief, right? Because you know you're losing that person.
Yeah.
I mean, at least how things were before. And I feel like that has to be compounding as it happens more and more. And by the fact that many child-free people don't just not want to have kids. They just don't like kids, so they don't want to be around kids. And so if you will rule out being around children, you're going to lose even more access to the people you care about who decide to have kids.
Yeah. And this to me is another one that's on you. Loneliness, shrinking social circles. If you never want to be lonely, really, truly have some kids. You won't even poop alone for years.
But Night Bitch would actually present that it made her very lonely. She felt very removed.
That's true. I mean, parenting young children is very isolating. That's true.
Right. But the good news is it comes with a built-in tight-knit community, right? With this another study I found showing that parents felt warmth towards each other, more warmth towards each other than they did people without kids.
Yeah, it's like PTSD. You bond.
Right. It's a club. It's an in-group, right? And not only do they feel more warmth towards parents than people without kids, they feel more warmth towards other parents than people without kids feel towards other people without kids, right?
Yeah.
So parents have this one thing that unifies us, gives us common ground, gives us something to talk about. Meanwhile, people without kids, they still got to like you, right? They're not going to let you into their social circle just because you don't have kids. And meanwhile, I feel like a lot of my new mom friendships are kind of just anchored in the fact that we're moms.
Oh, 100%. That's just, again, part of the deal. And I would consider that just a season, right? It's like if you didn't have kids, I would not hang out with you. And that's fine for now. You know, it's just this whole thing. Again, you can still have these friends. You just have to make more of an effort.
Right. And that is the essential truth, is that the older you get, the more times change, the harder it is to maintain relationships and the more effort you have to exert. Aging is lonely, whether you have kids or not. Quite a few legacy studies, which is my term for studies that are more than just 5 years old, they show that being child-free doesn't impact loneliness. What does is being a widow or widower or being divorced, especially for men. Men seem to really get hit hard in the aging process because where being child-free is associated with loneliness for unmarried men, in contrast, unmarried child-free women appear to fare pretty well, better than the rest of us. A 2009 study also found that never married child-free women are more likely to have higher levels of social activity.
That totally tracks with what we've learned over the years with males in friendships, that these women have prioritized relationships, friendships, and those kinds of things. They've made it a big part of their lives, and that's why they're happier. Good for them.
And I think that might even be the adverting the stigma too, where they're like, oh, your life's going to be empty. So then they seek out all these other ways to have meaning so that, like, because the social stigma, they push themselves to do more.
Or they're just bored.
Right. And again, when you dig into it, these are all kind of symptoms of one issue. And that is being child-free is still stigmatized in our culture and occupies a lower social standing in most societies, right? In some cultures, you're not even considered an adult until you have a child. But that can also appear as something way less extreme and as simple as being the default to hang back when there's an early release day because of the weather. And hey, I get it. I get that a lot of the negative, hateful writing online is a form of mental protection, right? People are having to oppose judgment that is often said to them explicitly and unexplicitly straight to their face. And that leads towards a lot of anger and resentment. They really are an out-group, so they use this language to establish their own community by flipping the script and attacking the attackers.
I think the lady doth protest too much. That's what I always think when I see that.
If you have to insist you're happy, like, yeah. I get that. And I really do try not to judge guys. I do, because I was in those shoes, right? But then I think about it, and do the gays have so much animosity for the straights? I grew up being one of the few white kids in a predominantly black school, and sure, I was not popular, but that had to do with a lot more reasons than my skin tone. I'm just not cool. But I never felt that anybody hated me, right? So it's just like, how are these groups who are very marginalized, have experienced so much prejudice and systemic oppression, how are they not as angry as these people who have just made a different choice in life? And you see that in their online spaces too. It's very different than the child-free.
Yeah, I think that probably those marginalized groups, they probably had more time to hone in their approach, given this longer history of racial oppression. But also, they probably have more actual inequities and very
real obstacles.
Yes. And thus have less time to be dicks online and rant about on how fucking unfair life is. And again, I go back to my message. All life is suffering, people. The more that you recognize that, the happier you are going to be, and you won't spend so much time feeling like Christ on a cross. Just like every moment of happiness you get is the exception, not the rule. And the more that you understand that and don't feel like you're so victimized because you're not happy every second of every day, you're going to be happier for it.
Right. The people who are the real victims never act like the victims. It's
Exactly.
like that's insane how that works out.
Yep.
But the rest of us who are like, the second something doesn't go our way, we're like, meh, 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 meh.
Yep.
So there's a lot that goes into being child-free, right? Like, I didn't mean to be so negative, right? Because there is a lot of stigma. There's a lot of judgment. Anybody who's not had kids has heard the comments, heard the questions. Like, they've gotten that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of societal double standards and emotional weight that comes with it. But as many child-free individuals say, this is all to improve quality of life. So, does it? And the answer, of course, is a big fat pile of who the fuck knows.
I knew that was going to be the outcome of the studies, because another thing I've learned doing this podcast is that studies on self-reported sentiments are always all over the goddamn board. Good fucking luck.
Right. And if you dig into that, that's what you're going to find. If you ask Google, their little AI answer thing is going to tell you that people without kids are happier, right? They're a few percentage points happier. But if you actually get into the studies and do that research for yourself, you're going to get a fucking mixed message here, right? I read through 5 to 10 studies or abstracts, let's be real.
Yeah.
Before my brain melted because it was just so much back and forth. Some contained contradicting lines back to back. And here's an excerpt from one of the ones that I read. Some studies have demonstrated positive associations between parenthood and life satisfaction or happiness. However, these findings were typically contingent on other socio-demographic characteristics. For example, some find positive associations between parenthood and life satisfaction or happiness only for men or only for women. Additionally, although one study demonstrated positive associations between parenthood and indicators of life satisfaction or happiness, a reanalysis of the same data resulted in a negative association when controlling for marital status. Adding to these mixed findings, additional studies demonstrated no difference in life satisfaction between parents and non-parents, or found that parents had lower levels of happiness than non-parents.
What the? That's just a whole line of fucking gibberish of saying nothing.
It's just nothing. It's like they could be happier, they could be not. So that's all to say, it does depend. It depends on a lot. Economic status, marriage status, how old you were when you had kids. And even after that, you're still comparing apples to oranges. I will say, the one spot that child-free people swept the board, satisfaction in marriage. I'll give them that. Because
I believe it.
Group projects are never fun. But I do believe that you're comparing apples and oranges whenever you look at these studies, because you are taking people who are hopefully able to live out their own life choices, the choices that they wanted, and then you're asking them if they're happy with it. I'd say most people are relatively happy, and like when they think about it, right? They're like, yeah, my life's great. People don't say their life's miserable. And that's the point of the choice, because hopefully they're getting to pick. They're either getting kids that they want or getting to live the beautiful life without kids that they want.
Yeah.
And therein lies the other truth, is that child-free people don't regret being child-free, even in old age. That showed up in so many studies. And that's amazing news, right? Because they're often told that they're going to change their mind. It's going to be too late. They're going to regret it. And I personally am so glad we live in a world where people can have choices and make choices that work out for them and make them happy in the end.
Absolutely.
But soapbox moment, it's like, why is this even a comparison, right? And I know I leaned into it with the title. It's like, why can't we all get along? Why does it have to be this or that? Who's happier? Who's better off?
And versus. Yeah. Why does it have to be a versus fight every time?
Yeah, right? Because a lot of the child-free content I see says that parents are miserable. But that's not what the studies find, right? I think if you talk to parents, sure, their day-to-day might be hard, but they're not wallowing in self-pity. We all are wallowing in self-pity. As we said, that's
a normal amount.
That's the modern world. And even studies that examine a person's happiness before and after becoming parents, they showed that it returned to pre-kid levels or increased, right? So you're going to be the same person you are regardless of if you have kids or if you don't have kids.
Wherever you go, there you are.
There you are. And I feel like all this focus on happiness, like, there's some perfect recipe that guarantees it. That's just not how it works. Humans are complicated. Humans are messy. It's going to be different for everyone.
And I also want to know, when did this great lie start that life was supposed to be happy all the time? That's what I want to know.
You don't know the good times if you don't have bads. And I think that's what kids are really good at doing, because I got to sleep until 7:30 today. Chef's kiss. It was the best thing I've had, because we've had like 6 to 8 weeks of 5:30 wake ups. Oh my God. I was like, God is real.
Complete 180.
Yeah. I'm like, wow, the world is beautiful. I'm an amazing parent. I'm going to bake some bread, some sourdough today, stay at home mom.
Good for you.
But okay, when I think about all this child-free versus non-child-free stuff and all the content I've seen online, which I don't see a lot of content of parents telling child-free people that they're making the wrong choice. Yeah. I see a lot of the inverse. And it really sticks out to me, because for a group that's so focused on choosing what's right for themselves and all about choice and individual freedom, they seem to be really quick to judge what's right for other people. AKA, if you have kids, you've made a bad choice. And I know, as we talked about, this is online. This is Reddit. This is TikTok. These places are where the ugliest parts of humanity rise to the surface. And I know most child-free people don't feel this way. And I'll touch grass, I promise. As soon as we're done, and as soon as the snow melts, I'm going to go out and I'm going to roll around
fucking
in
grass.
the grass. But as it does with this show, the research led me down some weird, twisty corridors of the internet. And it all got kicked off by frickin' Amy Adams and Night Bitch. I will never judge anybody for not having kids, but like, please don't tell me I'm miserable because I have kids. Like,
well, yeah, it's insulting. It's degrading. It assumes that you don't know your own mind and all these different kind of things. The same thing that they're upset that everyone else is telling them.
It's associating them to them. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such a weird crossroads, because I went again, and this ended up being way more negative than I meant it to be, where I was like, yeah, I'm going to write a freaking thesis for child-free people and blah, 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 and like talk about all the stigma they face and the challenges they have. And then it ended up being a lot more of a mixed bag, which is funny because I feel like I went into the child one being like, I'm going to knock down parents a peg. That's a little contrarian asshole. Sorry, world.
Aren't we all a bunch of contrarian nightmares?
The world would be a better place if my parents never had me. No.
Antinatalism.
Right.
Well, do you know what we love more than sleeping in and disposable income? I mean, we would know. We don't have either. A 5-star rating and review. And of course, please share this podcast with the person who asked you, so when are you having kids? Or share it with that child-free person in your life and get them really mad at you, or me, or Rachel. Just have them all send the hate mail our way.
Text it too.
Want it. Yeah. You can click that link that says message us, text us. I don't remember what it says. It's completely anonymous. We will not get your phone number, but we can read your lovely little anonymous message. You can send hate mail right to my phone. Do it.
Or email us at rude@impolitesocietypodcast.com, like our good friend Randy, who was one of the instigating forces down this rabbit hole.
Yeah, send us your topic ideas. Thank you, Randy.
All right, I think that's it for today. Be nice to each other, everyone, and may your loins be exactly as fruitful as you'd like them to be. Stay curious, a little baby socialites. And keep marching to the beat of your own drums. Yeah, you're our children. We didn't need to have children. You're our kids. We couldn't be child-free even if we wanted, because
you're so silent. What a wonderful child.
No, you never wake me up at 5:30.